Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next instalment of our SASE podcast with Chris Gilmore. Is there economy of scale for somebody who's looking for a full SASE architecture solution up front?
It can be, and this is where you get into the kind of multi-vendor, single vendor. How do I kind of build it? Everything is use case, right? There is no single, this is the absolute perfect design for everybody. It doesn't exist because 2 companies, 3 companies in the same vertical of the same size, same target customer markets will have different requirements. So you can't even build a blueprint and say, that's my blueprint for recruitment, off we go. You know, it's very much what are they trying to do that you can then help them to underpin. So it's a very difficult thing to sort of say this type of customer needs all of it. I'd say any customer who has cloud-based services, which tends to be most of them, any customer who has workers who are working either remotely, fully, hybrid, or a kind of combination of everything in between. And I'd say anyone who has had network performance challenges or visibility challenges and wants to understand more about what's going on. The network used to be a kind of a fluffy cloud. There was no visibility. Everyone would blame it if the things were slow. One of the things SD-WAN does is gives you a lot more visibility. So you can then push it back and say, actually, the problem is that application delivery controller there or this server or whatever. So it gives you more certainty around how the network's performing. With the cloud security piece, what you're doing is you're creating centralized policy that you can apply globally. So it means that new users are very easy to onboard because they fall into a particular policy area. You can then push a client out to their laptop, or sometimes they're clientless, and that's them onboarded, that's them online. You know, there's no sort of delivering a box to their site, to their home office. There's no sort of enforced rigor around you must do that, and that. Literally a laptop and a phone to site to them at home, and they can be online, and they can be on the corporate network, and they can access all the services, and they can be secured, and they can be, policy managed. So it gives you a lot of scale. It gives you a lot of the ability to create consistency. I mentioned earlier, consistency is the CISO's sort of holy grail. Building policies and applying everyone to those policies means if you get the policy right, you know that they're covered. So it means you can focus more around making sure that the policies that you're putting in place map to strategically what you're trying to do, and also what kind of things you're trying to protect and how, without stymieing the innovation of the users at the same time. And then the network piece just underpins all of that and allows you to have more sort of available and optimized connectivity to those applications and services.
Talking of the global organizations, is this just for global enterprise-sized customers, or can you give us a flavor of who would be the typical size of customer that would get the most benefit out of SASE?
You could have one business with 500 users, right? If that one business has 10 sites with 50 users in each site, then they're a good fit for SD-WAN. But at the same time, you could have one building with all 500 in it, and both are applicable for SSE. So your cloud security could apply whether you've got one location or 10 or 50 or 100. SD-WAN tends to make sense when you have multiple locations that you're trying to network together and then also create your connectivity to your cloud services. So SD-WAN tends to be driven more by a number of sites, but the cloud security could be a single building and 100 users, because you have to be able to apply that working from Rome mentality of wherever you are.
And from an industry point of view, does SASE fit better with a particular vertical?
Not really. Again, it's all use case. We're seeing quite a lot of traction in retail, large-scale retail, where the cloud security requirements are simpler and more consistent, but the fact that you can spin up the SD-WAN component to give them the ability to be clever around how they build the connectivity to that location, harnessing potentially different underlay providers and the ability to take on different types of connectivity based on where they are and what the available options are. But you might want them to be at secure EPOS or some sort of PCI-controlled transactional traffic. So you have to go through security platforms, and this gives you the reach to be able to do that on a global perspective. Retail we're seeing quite a lot of traction in. Anywhere where there are users who are potentially not in the main office environments will always work for an SSE perspective, just because it gives you that global reach, irrespective of kind of location. In terms of ideal verticals, I've seen customers across all of them. I've seen there are fairly significant public sector customers. I mean, the NHS is a massive user of cloud security, for example. We've got central government departments. There are local government councils who are utilising SASE for the network for all of the things that they're delivering as services, but then the SSE component for their own users, for example. We're seeing a lot in industry. We're seeing a lot in the private sector, especially in things like finance markets, insurance, professional services businesses, where there are a lot of businesses where your people are your business, because it's about enabling them to be as productive as they can. So the network enables them to access the applications without thinking about it. The cloud security means that they can be secured without having to think about it. The ideal thing is they open their laptop or whatever. They don't have to connect to anything. They don't have to log into anything. The security just happens. It just takes it out of the equation. It's built in from the base. And it just means that there's no sort of second thought about it. It becomes almost like a utility. The network and the security are just assumed to be there because you're on the network. So from an industry perspective, it can be anything. I mean, anywhere where there are users who are mobile, or locations that are in multiple areas, anywhere they have to connect users to their applications that could be on-site, off-site, there will be some use case there. Some are more appropriate than others. If you've got one site, SD-WAN's probably not the best option for you, but secure service edge could well be, depending on the number of users you've got. If you've got 500 sites and there's one person per user per site, unlikely, of course. SD-WAN might work very well there, and also your secure service edge. So the SASE full piece would work there. So there's no real here is a blueprint of a perfect user or perfect customer. It's more about enabling securely connected enterprise users or users as the use case, and then that will map into a number of users for different perspectives.
So in a nutshell, what do you see as the benefits to an organisation who've actually adopted SASE architecture?
I think it's there's a couple of key features that the combined solution will allow them. One is flexibility, right? So it's a flexibility around how their connectivity is built. It's flexibility around whether they use 4G, 5G, internet, satellite, MPLS, whatever. So there's flexibility around how they build the sites out based on their own business requirements, and also local restrictions in terms of a mining company may not have internet access by a line. It could be satellite or 4G at a push. The cloud security aspect has real value for people because, in effect, you're saying, I no longer have a boundary to my security. I no longer have the situation where if I'm in the office, I'm secured because there's some firewalls sat there. But the moment I walk outside and sit in Costa, I'm potentially at risk. This allows you to, in effect, say that the boundary for security around your organisation is just as elastic as the organisation itself. Yeah? So there's a number of benefits around that, and then there's visibility you can drive out of it. You can see all the things. And then fundamentally, one of the main tenets of SD-WAN is centralised management. One of the main tenets of Secure Service Edge is centralised management. So you're fundamentally consolidating tools down to give you a single point where you can say, here's what's going on in my network. A single point you can kind of say, here's what's going on with my users from a security perspective. Now, sometimes that can be the same portal. Sometimes that can be a number of them. There are merits in both ways. But what you're looking at is the ability to deploy sites consistently. So the build for a location is consistent. Your policies for your security is consistent. So once you define things well, you can apply it globally. So whenever you're looking at an SD-WAN or an SSE engagement from our perspective, the workshops and the design piece are the absolutely critical piece, because it's about fundamentally burying in and understanding what the main challenges are, because the design bit, once you design it properly and get the policies right, the deployment is a case of next site out, and new users can join, and it's all fairly fluid. Once you get that initial policy and the design correct, you can apply changes globally. You can apply a new user group globally. It's the change you can apply is very, very swift. So it allows you to be more agile as a business.
Considering there's lots of vendors at the moment out there promoting their full SASE solution, so how does an organisation like Axians, like us, go about recommending which solution is actually best for each organisation?
Fundamentally, we go in not having an answer. What's the question? The first question I ask every customer is, what are you trying to do? I've had RFPs before where we've won the RFP, and then the first thing I've said is, right, now what are you actually trying to do? Because sometimes it's very difficult. You as a business will have a challenge, and you'll go, right, I have a challenge, I'll build a business case to fix that challenge, I'll apply for budget from the board, I'll get sign off for that, they approve the business case and the budget's approved. You've then got to try and translate that business requirement into technical requirements to then get the market. And that can be quite hit or miss. And if it's very clear cut, it's quite semi kind of like sensible to kind of translate across. But sometimes it can be really quite difficult, and you can miss quite a lot. And that's why there's a rise in a lot of consultancies who can sit there and interpret the business case and then try and translate that based on their own experience. So the first thing is what fundamentally they're trying to do. What are the things they care about? What is things like scale, locations, where are they going to be? Sometimes it boils down to simple things like, can I get spares to a location within a reasonable SLA to make it worth time? So from an SD-WAN perspective, there's still functionally a CPE. There's a customer premise equipment terminating that network where the local network plugs into and then the wide area begins, right? That can be virtual, but it's got to sit on something that you can connect a physical circuit to. So whether it's virtual on call it a VMware ESXi environment, so it's like a hypervisor and it's a little image, or whether it's a dedicated box, or whether it's a dedicated vendor platform, there's something there. If that goes bang, then people like cake and eat. They want next generation network that drives efficiencies, but they also want 4-hour SLA. So sometimes, the whole design can be thrown to, I can get that box to that location in 4 hours. And that steers you towards certain things. So a lot of the large vendors are twigging to this, and their distribution of their hardware is becoming quite a big thing for them, because they're realising that they've got to do. But that also is where partners like ourselves can step in. We have our own forwarding locations, so we can adapt the SLAs we can take from the vendors to give us more control over what SLAs we give to our customers. So we remove a little bit of that from the end decision-making process, but if it's a global deployment, for example, you want to know you can get a box into the Bermuda within a certain time frame. Outside of that, it's entirely use case driven. It's what features are you keen on and why, and what do you want to get out of it and why. What do you have now? What doesn't work? What does work? What kind of things you try and to kind of carry over? What kind of things you want to leave behind? Also, it can be affected by who is going to be involved in the decision making process, but also who's going to be on the customer side helping with the design. Now, going back a couple of years, the design would have been a heavy techie coming in on the customer side, call it gamekeeper, and then we'd have techie hitting heads together. They'd sit down, they'd work out stuff in a very kind of, granular detail. What we're finding is a lot more input from line of business. We're finding a lot more of the business want an input into how things are designed, because it materially affects them. And they've now twigged the fact that they can leverage this to give them an extra edge over their competition. So when you've got external, I'll call them less technically able contributors towards the overall solution, that can influence the kind of technology you use as well. I mean, some of the technologies we use are very traditionally technically built. There are some applications and some platforms that we use who literally will group things together in a way that anyone could understand. So you can say, I want my Teams, my voice, and my video application to go very, very quickly across the network, and you can almost build it in those sort of models. So there's ones that are using the traditional sort of technical phraseology and building blocks to build the kind of configs, and then there are some that will use very standardized phrases that most people can understand, which means you can involve more people from the business in it, and that can be a steerer. So sometimes you're looking at things that are technical features, and user and customer A would like, this is important to them, that's important to them, they're not bothered about that, and that will steer you a certain way. And sometimes it's the non-technical aspects that almost steer you, and it's the fact that they want anybody to be able to read the reporting that comes out. They want to look at what type of reporting you can get, what kind of things you can get out of the box from a visibility perspective. And then the audience, being technical, non-technical, everything in between, will drive the kind of platform that you end up using, because that becomes a key criteria for them. There are what you'd call functional and non-functional criteria for how we make decisions around what platforms we use, and it's down to the customer as to where that sort of balance works.
Chris, thank you very much for your time spent on the SASE podcast. Much appreciated, and I'm certainly found it very informative. I hope everybody else has found it as informative. If you have any other questions, please do get in contact with Axians. You've got all the details available.
Thank you for joining us. If anyone's got any questions regarding SASE or would like clarification around SASE, what the component parts are, why you should care, please reach out to me. I'm available on LinkedIn as Chris Gilmore. And also we've done additional blogs around this subject that are available from the Axians website. Thank you.